But we begin tonight with Donald Trump's life of impunity. Trump is a man who has never faced any real consequences for his actions. It's like letting a child do whatever they want. You know what you'll get when they grow up. Trump does and says whatever until his behavior becomes more and more offensive and absurd, and then he just gets away with it. This sad fact about the people who raised him and the sycophants and toadies who have propped up his failures and his ego is currently playing out in front of us all. Today, he got a break in Georgia. An appeals court agreed to consider his appeal to have Fulton County DA Fani Willis disqualified from his election interference case, likely delaying that case even further. And in a case literally anyone else would already be in prison for, Trump's mishandling of classified documents, his personal judge, Aileen Cannon, has delayed it indefinitely. It was scheduled to start later this month, but Judge Cannon says, oops, too many unresolved issues, can't do it. In the only case that's actually moving forward, his hush money election interference case, Trump seems to violate his gag order every day. And yesterday, he got yet another warning, this time for cursing and shaking his head during key witness testimony. But he hasn't gotten thrown in jail like the rest of us would have by now. If we were talking about literally anyone else, I would say that this was the luckiest man on the planet. But he's not. It's just yet another example of the sense of personal impunity that dictates Donald Trump's entire life. And the ultimate display of his sense of personal impunity was this sickening moment from 2005.
I gotta use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the I can do anything.
Trump's belief in his own impunity is at the heart of every aspect of his hush money election interference trial. And that's exactly how 2005-era Trump became a direct threat to the 2016 Trump who was running for president. Because in 2006, the year after he claimed, when you're a star, they let you do it, he was living up to it as his new wife, Melania, and infant son, Barron, were back at home. It was in June 2006 that Playboy model Karen McDougal says she met Trump during the taping of Celebrity Apprentice at the Playboy Mansion, and they began an affair. The next month, he took his Playboy bunny mistress to a golf tournament in Lake Tahoe. She says she footed the bill with the promise of reimbursement from Trump, which anyone who's ever done business with him knows was unlikely. And it was at that tournament that he met the other central figure in his most pressing legal issue, porn actress Stormy Daniels. He invited her to his hotel suite and leaned on his celebrity status to get her to sleep with him, with promises of a possible role on his show. Instead, he wanted something much more basic. In her testimony on Tuesday, she said that after using the restroom in Trump's suite, quote, when I opened the bathroom door to come out, Mr. Trump had come into the bedroom and was on the bed, basically between myself and the exit, wearing nothing but his underwear. She said at one point during the brief and not exactly enthusiastic sexual encounter that followed, I just thought, oh, my God, what did I misread to get here? And that she just wanted to be anywhere but there. The reality is Donald Trump could never have goaded a porn star into his bed, let alone become president of the United States, without that era. A semi-failed real estate developer propped up by a television show that gave him the appearance of being a successful businessman. So when he ran for president in 2016, his history as a crap businessman wasn't what haunted him. It was the women. One of the things that's fallen into the memory hole is just how much of a crisis Trump's 2016 campaign was in by the time we found out about the Access Hollywood tape. After more than a year of the worst imaginable press while running against Hillary Clinton, the first woman nominated by a major party. And most of it was self-inflicted, starting with his response to questions from then Fox host Megyn Kelly during a primary debate.
She gets out and she starts asking me all sorts of ridiculous questions. And, you know, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
Donald Trump said the following about you, quote, look at that face. Would anyone vote for that? Can you imagine that, the face of our next president?
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
If Hillary Clinton were a man,
I don't think she'd get 5% of the vote. The only thing she's got going is the woman's card.
And that doesn't even include the sexually derogatory term he used to describe Clinton's loss in the 2008 primary, or the tweet criticizing the looks of his rival Ted Cruz's wife. And remember, it wasn't as though Donald Trump's extensive history of rampant misogyny was any secret. For decades, when he was still a Bill Clinton Democrat, he'd found a safe space on Howard Stern's radio show to showcase his boorishness openly, talking about leering at teenage pageant contestants when they were undressed and salivating over his own daughter Ivanka's looks. But his time as a semi-regular on Stern's show ended with the launch of The Apprentice. And now that he was running, now as a Republican, his lecherous past was coming back to haunt him. In May 2016, the New York Times revealed that dozens of women said he'd acted inappropriately, everything from unwelcome romantic advances to unending commentary on the female form and unsettling workplace conduct, according to interviews. In September, during the first debate, Hillary Clinton called him out on his past comments in front of 80 million viewers.
This is a man who has called women pigs, slobs, and dogs. And one of the worst things he said was about a woman in a beauty contest. He called this woman Miss Piggy. Then he called her Miss Housekeeping because she was Latina.
Trump took the bait, of course, and dug his hole deeper, amplifying her point by attacking former beauty queen Alicia Machado. He went on Fox to complain about her, quote, massive weight gain, and ranted on Twitter, calling her disgusting and making claims about a non-existent sex tape. By the end of the first week in October, it seemed like he might be done for. On the afternoon of Friday, October 7th, the Obama administration formally blamed Russia for hacking the Democratic National Committee. But before Trump and his campaign could face any scrutiny about that, a short time later on that same day, the Washington Post dropped a bombshell, the aforementioned tape of Trump having an extremely lewd conversation about women in 2005 during the height of his Apprentice-era fame. And the rest, as they say, is history. And the gross, creepy behind the scenes has spilled out into the open as Trump runs for president for a third time during his hush money election interference trial. Last week, Hope Hicks testified that there was consensus among us all that the Access Hollywood tape was damaging and this was a crisis, adding that it dominated the coverage for, I would say the 36 hours leading up to an upcoming Trump-Clinton debate. Trump tried to fight back by bringing women who had accused Bill Clinton of sexual misconduct to the debate 2 days later, during which Trump claimed that he'd never kissed or grabbed a woman's private parts without permission. 3 days later, the New York Times published the accounts of two women who said he'd done just that. 2 weeks after that, 4 days before the election, the Wall Street Journal published an article about the National Enquirer, paying alleged Trump mistress Karen McDougal for her story, and mentioned another fling, Stormy Daniels. Joining me now is Omarosa Manigault Newman, a former Trump White House aide and former contestant in season 1 of Trump's Apprentice reality TV show. She's also the best-selling author of Unhinged, an insider's account of the Trump White House. Omarosa, it has been a long time. It is good to see you, and you are just the person that I wanted to talk to today, so thank you for making yourself available.
Thanks for having me, Joy.
Of course. And I've read your book, obviously. And so I know that you uniquely understand what a crisis the campaign was in after the Access Hollywood tape. Would you agree with Hope Hicks that it was an immediate and all-consuming crisis?
Oh, it was, not only was it a crisis, but it was utter chaos in the middle of the campaign. And in fact, there were several of us that were actually on the road on a Woman for Trump bus tour, believe it or not. It was terrible.
And the reality is, and I've said this in other interviews, I mean, he's running against what would be the first woman president. So he's already has to position himself to be able to win women voters. But his whole history, the leering at his daughter, the gross things he said about women and Miss USA pageants, et cetera. Was there a sense that they had to shut these women down? And does it ring true to you what he's being charged with, that he was willing to pay and reimburse Michael Cohen for him to pay to keep Stormy Daniels from being added to the list?
Well, Joy, I want to take you back a little bit to 2006, something that I think Stormy Daniels referenced when he was promising her that she could be on The Apprentice. She was talking about Celebrity Apprentice. I actually appeared on that season, the first season of The Celebrity Apprentice, and there was actually another playmate that actually ended up on the cast of Celebrity Apprentice. I don't know if you recall that, but Tiffany Fallon was selected for that cast instead of, I believe, Stephanie, Stormy Daniels, or any of the other women, yes, that were lobbying to be in that spot. So Donald was actually successful in getting one of his paramours on our season. But in terms of whether or not I believe that he does that, I've seen them pay off people. I've seen them try to pay off folks, to silence them. In fact, I don't know if you recall, they actually tried to do the same thing to me, where they tried to offer $20,000 a month or something like that for me to work on the campaign for several years so that I wouldn't share what I actually shared in my book. So this is kind of their pattern. This is par for the course in Donald Trump's world.